My name is Claire Whitfield. I'm 32 years old, and 90 seconds before a notary looked up from her stamp and asked one simple question, my brother was screaming my name across a title company conference room. The question was about a house our mother left to both of us, the house he had already sold behind my back for $310,000. My family always called me the quiet one, the one who wouldn't cause trouble, the daughter who'd fold if you pushed hard enough. They were wrong, and that afternoon everyone in that room found out just how wrong. Welcome back to Cherry Revenge Tales. If you're watching tonight, drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're joining us from. And if you believe in calm, quiet justice, the kind that never has to raise its voice, go ahead and like and subscribe before we get into it. Now let me take you back to where all of this really started. 1 week earlier, we were all sitting around my mother's old dining table, the one she'd left behind along with the house when she passed 8 months before. My brother Marcus had called the dinner himself, said it was time we all got on the same page about the estate. His wife Deborah sat beside him in a blazer that cost more than my mortgage payment, and our Aunt Patrice, my mother's older sister, sat at the head of the table like she'd been appointed judge for the evening. "You know Mom always wanted this handled fast," Marcus said, cutting into his steak without looking at me. "No sense letting a house sit empty for a year while you figure out your feelings about it." Deborah gave a small, tight laugh. "Some of us have actual financial plans, Claire. Not everyone can afford to just let money sit in real estate forever." "Man," I said nothing. I just watched my brother talk about the house like it was already his, describing the buyers he'd found. A young couple willing to close within 30 days, cash offer, $310,000, no contingencies. He said the number so easily, so casually, like he was reading off a grocery list instead of naming the value of our mother's entire life. He talked about splitting the proceeds like he was doing me a favor, 60 for him, 40 for me, because he said he'd done all the heavy lifting while I was off somewhere being emotional about a house. "That house needs new plumbing, a new roof, probably new everything," he added, waving his fork like the whole conversation was already decided. "You wouldn't even know where to start with any of that. Let the people who actually understand real estate handle real estate." Deborah reached over and patted my hand like she was comforting a child who'd lost a toy. "It's just easier this way, Claire. Trust me, some of us just aren't built for these kinds of decisions." "I haven't agreed to sell," I said finally. Marcus set his fork down. "Nobody's asking you to agree, Claire. We're informing you. This is happening whether you're comfortable or not." Aunt Patrice nodded along like she was watching a tennis match with a predetermined winner. "Your brother has always been the practical one in this family," she said. "You were always more sentimental. It's probably for the best that he's handling this." I remember smiling politely and asking to be excused early. Nobody stopped me. The following Tuesday, Marcus called and told me a real estate agent needed my signature on the disclosure forms, just as a formality. I told him I wanted to see the paperwork first, wanted to understand the terms, wanted to talk to a lawyer before signing anything involving a house that was half mine. He laughed, actually laughed, and said, "You always did overthink everything. It's a house, not a hostage negotiation." 2 days later, Deborah texted me a photo of a moving truck parked outside our mother's driveway. "Buyers want to start renovations early," the message read. "Hope you're not going to make this difficult." I called Marcus directly after that. He picked up sounding annoyed before I even said a word. "Look, Claire, I don't have time to hand-hold you through every step of this," he said. "The house is getting sold, the money is getting split, and the sooner you sign, the sooner this is over for both of us. Don't make Mom's death about your ego." Hearing him say that out loud, using our mother's memory as a pressure tactic, was the moment something in me went very still and very clear, not angry, just clear. That was when I understood this wasn't a conversation anymore. It was a countdown, and I wasn't in the driver's seat of it, so I stopped responding to their calls and started making a few of my own. I called the county recorder's office and asked for a copy of anything filed against the property in the last month. I called our mother's estate attorney, a woman named Rosalind Ferreira, who had handled the will and who I hadn't spoken to since the funeral, and I called an old classmate of mine who now worked as a document examiner for a local law firm, because something in my gut told me to look closer before I let this go any further. 3 days after that, I sat in Rosalind's office and watched her face change as she scrolled through a scanned copy of a warranty deed. My signature was on it, a signature I had never written. This came through the title company 2 weeks ago, she said quietly. Someone submitted it as part of the closing package. Claire, did you sign this? I told her no. I told her I had never seen that document in my life. She sat back in her chair and was quiet for a long moment, and then she said something I've never forgotten. Then someone forged a legal instrument and tried to pass it through an active real estate transaction. That's not a family disagreement anymore, that's a felony. I asked her not to do anything yet. I wanted to see how far Marcus would take this on his own, without knowing I already had proof. Rosalind understood immediately, and she told me something that changed how I walked into every room after that. Closings in this state require a notary to witness signatures in person, or verify identity remotely under strict procedure. If your brother is claiming you signed this in front of someone, there has to be a notary attached to it, and that notary put their name and their license on the line for a signature that was never real. That was the piece nobody in my family thought to consider. Not Marcus, who was so used to getting his way that he assumed paperwork was just a formality to push through. Not Deborah, who thought confidence was the same thing as competence. Not even Aunt Patrice, who had spent her whole life mistaking my silence for weakness instead of what it actually was, which was patience. The following week, Marcus called again, this time with an edge in his voice I hadn't heard since we were kids. The buyers want to close Friday, he said. You need to stop being difficult and just show up and sign what needs to be signed. I already signed everything I'm going to sign, I told him, and let the silence after that sentence do whatever work it needed to do. He didn't understand what I meant. He couldn't have. He thought I was finally caving. 2 days before the closing, I met with Rosalind again, and this time she brought in a colleague of hers who specialized in real estate fraud. I also reached out quietly to the title company handling the sale and asked, using nothing but my legal right as a named owner on the property, to attend the closing in person. Nobody objected. Nobody thought to ask why. The morning of the closing, I put on the same navy blazer I'd worn to my mother's funeral, and before I left my apartment, I turned on the small recording device built into my watch, the one I'd bought months earlier for work meetings and never imagined I'd need for something like this. I said a quiet, calm sentence out loud to timestamp it, the way Rosalind had told me to. Then I drove to the title company. The conference room was already full when I walked in. Marcus, Deborah, the buyers, a young couple who had no idea what they'd stepped into. A real estate agent shuffling papers, and at the head of the table, a notary named Elena Brooks, glasses pushed up on her head, stack of documents in front of her, completely unaware that she was about to become the most important person in the room. Marcus looked up and saw me, and for a split second, something in his face flickered, the first real doubt I'd seen from him in years. "What are you doing here?" he said, not even bothering to make it a question. "I'm a co-owner of this property," I said. "I have every right to be here." Deborah's voice rose immediately, sharp and performative, the kind of voice built to make a room take her side. "This is exactly what I mean," she said, turning to the buyers like she was narrating a play for their benefit. "She shows up at the last minute to cause a scene because she can't handle that Marcus is the one actually capable of managing this family's affairs." "You people are all the same," Aunt Patrice added, sitting in the corner with her arms crossed, "always wanting the money without doing any of the work." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I sat down at the table, folded my hands, and waited. Elena Brooks, the notary, cleared her throat and began walking through the closing documents line by line, the way notaries are trained to do, methodical, unhurried, entirely unbothered by the tension thickening around her. She reached the warranty deed. She looked down at the signature line. Then she looked up, first at Marcus, then at me. "I need to confirm something before we proceed," she said, her voice calm and procedural, the exact opposite of everyone else's in that room. "This deed lists a remote online notarization completed 3 weeks ago, under my license number. I have no record of performing that notarization. Can someone explain to me how my credentials ended up on a document I never witnessed?" The room went completely silent. Marcus's mouth opened and closed. Deborah's confident smile cracked at the edges. The buyers looked at each other, visibly alarmed, realizing they were sitting inside a transaction that was quietly falling apart in real time. "There must be some kind of clerical error," Marcus finally said, but his voice had lost every ounce of the certainty it carried a week earlier. Elena Brooks did not raise her voice. She simply set the document down and said, I take my license very seriously, Mr. Whitfield. I'll be reporting this discrepancy to the State Notary Commission and the title insurance underwriter immediately. Ma'am, she said, turning to me, did you sign this deed? No, I said. I have never seen this document until this morning, and I have the sworn statement from my mother's estate attorney to confirm it. Deborah's composure shattered first. She spun toward Marcus, her voice climbing into something shrill and panicked. You told me she'd already agreed to this. You said it was handled. Was I helping you commit actual fraud? Keep your voice down, Marcus hissed, but it was too late. The buyer's agent was already on her phone. The title company representative was quietly gathering the documents back into a folder, and Aunt Patrice, the same woman who'd called me sentimental and weak a week earlier, was sliding her chair backward from the table, as if putting physical distance between herself and my brother might undo whatever she'd already said in front of witnesses. You always thought you were smarter than everyone, Marcus said, turning on me, his voice cracking under the weight of a room that no longer believed him. You always thought you were better than the rest of us. I looked at him and let a long moment of silence pass before I answered. You said I overthink everything, I said quietly. Turns out I just thought ahead. Elena Brooks closed the folder in front of her and stood up. This closing is postponed indefinitely pending investigation, she said. I'd also recommend everyone in this room consult their own attorneys before this meeting continues any further. Marcus didn't say another word. He just sat there, staring at the table, while Deborah gathered her purse with shaking hands and refused to look at anyone. The buyers left first, apologizing to me on their way out, though they had nothing to apologize for. Aunt Patrice left without a word. And I sat there for one more minute, calm, steady, the recording on my watch still quietly running, before I stood up and walked out into the parking lot alone, and for the first time in 8 months, I felt like I could finally breathe. The fraud case moved slowly but surely after that. Marcus faced charges for forgery and attempted deed fraud, and the title company's insurer opened a separate claim against him personally. Deborah filed for divorce 4 months later, telling a mutual friend she didn't marry a criminal. Aunt Patrice sent me one email, months afterward, that never apologized, only asked if I planned on holding this over the family forever. I didn't respond. Some questions don't deserve an answer, only distance. If you take one thing from my story tonight, let it be this. Being quiet is not the same as being weak, and being patient is not the same as being naive. People will always underestimate the ones who don't raise their voices, right up until the moment the truth does the shouting for them. You don't need to fight loud to win. You just need to be ready, and you need to trust the value of your own name enough to protect it, even when the people who are supposed to love you try to sign it away without asking. Thank you so much for watching this story here on Cherry Revenge Tales. If it meant something to you, please take a moment to like and subscribe, and if you haven't already, drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from tonight.